coming, so I get them. Yeah.
All right, good. Attention, attention, everyone. And let's get started. Thank you so much, Chicago, for having me here. For those who don't know me, my name is Nuno Maduro. I am the creator of multiple open source packages in the PHP ecosystem. I have created stuff such as Laravel 0, Collision, Larastand, OpenAI for PHP, PHP Insights, and more. I'm also core team member at Laravel. Anyone here uses Laravel? Quite a few people, huh? So I'm a Laravel core team member. Some of the features we are using today were done by me and the team. And I am also the creator of Pest PHP, which is the topic of today. If you don't know what Pest PHP, it's pretty much an elegant PHP testing framework with a focus on simplicity. And it is damn simple. We have released Pest in 2020, and since then, we have become the second most popular testing framework in the world, just behind PHP Unit, which have been the standard for a long, long time. Now, better than tell you, it's just basically showing you, so I prepared the live coding session for you all. Thank God we have this screen on again, so you can actually see the code while I am coding it. Anyway, let's get started. So here, on my left, I have my Sublime Text, which is my editor of a choice, and on the right, I have my terminal. And as you may know, all of you, at least some of you said that you use Laravel. Laravel ships with PHP Unit by default. And PHP Unit has been the standard in the industry for a long time. I think PHP Unit is like 20 years old at this point. And when you look at the PHP Unit test, it pretty much looks like this. In order to have a test, you need to have a namespace, some uses, a class that extends something, and then you need a public function with a bunch of underscores to actually see your first test. When you run PHP Unit on a terminal, you kind of are used to this output. On top, you see PHP Unit 10 by Sebastian. You see a runtime, a configuration, and a bunch of stuff that we don't really care. Now, I'm going to show you the difference between this API on the left and this output and Pest PHP. So to get started, the only thing I have to do is go to my terminal and type composer require pest php/pest. Once I run this command, which I already have done at home, I wasn't sure about the internet connection, sorry PHPTek. Once you run this command, you get Pest installed in your machine, in your application, and you can immediately run Pest. And there is two things that you can immediately understand. The first one is that Pest is a progressive testing framework, meaning that it just works on top of your existing PHP Unit test suites. You don't need to change a thing. You just have to install it, run it, and immediately just get a success message like this one. The second thing that you might notice is the output, which is a little bit more elegant, in my opinion. You can see it's spaced on top, bottom, left, and right. You get a green message passing test for each passing test. You get the total number of tests and also the duration. Now, the output gets different when there is a success, but it gets way better when there is a failure. So I'm going to get back into my test suite right here. And as you know, looking at this test, it's kind of obvious what this test is doing. We are pretty much visiting the landing page, and then we are asserting that the landing page is OK by asserting the status 200. Now, I'm going to simply go right here and assert the status is 404. And of course, if I run my test suite now with PHP Unit, I get a failure. However, this output, well, we are used to it, but if you look, if you take a step back, you can see that it's a bunch of text, and that it is kind of hard to understand what's happening. And right here in the middle, I can actually see, well, this test is failing because I was expecting a 404, and I'm getting a 200. So now I'm going to clear my terminal and run this test suite, this time with Pest. And this is the difference. Pest really comes with a code snippet that really points in the right direction. So with this code snippet right here, I can see that my particular test is failing on this specific line because it's missing asserting that 404 is identical to 200. Now I can simply come here, revert my change by asserting the status is 200, and I'm going to run Pest, and of course, now it's passing as expected. This is something, regarding output, this is something we'll see across the Pest testing framework, is that we really care about the messages that get printed on the console. Now, changing a little bit of topics, we have seen that Pest's output is different from PHP Unit, but it's something we offer which is totally revolutionary, which is the API. Now, in the past, I was a JavaScript developer. I'm sorry for that. I worked doing JavaScript for a long time, and they have this, probably the most popular testing framework over there, called it Jest. And Jest gives you this eat expect API, which probably some of you are familiar with, and I started using it, and I wanted some of that to PHP. So that's what I have done with Pest. So what I'm going to do here is convert this existing test written in PHP Unit to Pest. And check this out. The only thing you have to do is copy-paste the content within your test, which is exactly what I'm going to do right now, and then you can remove all of this. No public functions, no underscores, no classes, namespaces, nothing. And you simply type, it has a welcome page. You pass a closure, and within this closure, I'm going to copy-paste my content of the test, just like that, and then I'm going to run Pest on the terminal and pretty much get exactly the same result. So this particular test right here is 50% of the amount of code we had before and reach exactly the same output. Now, some questions people have when they see this new API of testing is that, well, do I am losing some features by using this new API? Well, the answer is no. Pest gives you full feature parity with PHP Unit, so all the things you like, you can still use them while using Pest. One of them, for example, is the possibility of skipping tests. So something I can do here is just change the method skip it, just like that. Run Pest on a terminal, and now I have one test being skipped. It's useful when you don't want a particular test to run. Now, another thing that you probably like is have incomplete tests. So here, just below, if I would do something like it has a theme page, and then I don't pass a concrete implementation of my test, I run Pest, and now I get one incomplete test. So all the things you love on PHP Unit, they are available somehow on Pest PHP. There is another few things we have, some tweaks we like to have on top of this API. One of them got added in Pest v2, which is the possibility of creating to-dos. Sometimes, the fact that you are not passing a concrete test doesn't mean that the test is actually complete. It's simply a to-do. So if you want to do that, what you have to do is just change the method to-do, just like that. You run Pest, and now you see that the output clearly tells you that you have a test suite which is passing. However, you have a task which is a to-do. Now, on the Pest website, you will see a lot of small, juicy things like this, but I want to change the focus of this talk to talk a little bit about plugins. Now, Pest, the framework, is actually a little bit small. Doesn't have too many features because we like to keep the framework clean. However, we have this thing called the plugin API, which allows ourselves in the community developing these optional features that people may require through Composer. And one of those features I actually really like is code coverage. Who is familiar with code coverage here? Raise your hand. Everyone, that's pretty cool. You will love this option. So for those who don't know, code coverage allows you to assess the code quality of your test suite, understanding what code is exactly being tested. It's insanely useful. It doesn't tell you everything about the test suite, but it tells you a little bit, at least what portions of your code are actually being tested. And if you have worked with code coverage before, especially in PHP, it's not the best thing to work with because you pass an option like code coverage PHP and then you get the file that you need to import somewhere, or you get HTML, like, yuck. It's like a total mess, and we are trying to actually fix that on Pest PHP. So let me show you how does it work on Pest. So I'm going to get back into my project right here. And the only thing I have to do, the only thing is really just pass this option, -- coverage, to really start seeing the coverage on my project. So check this out. Here on top, I have my test suite running, and then I have this beautiful code report that really tells me what's happening regarding the code coverage of my test suite. So I can see, for example, that this particular file, call it block controller is not being tested. But for example, this particular class called base controller is being tested with 100% test coverage. However, this authenticate middleware on Laravel have 0% test coverage. That's probably because we don't have any authentication test in this particular test suite. Now, just below, you can see the total of your coverage. So here, for example, I can see that I have 56% of code coverage, which is not a lot, but it's probably more than 90% of all projects in PHP. People don't like to do tests these days, which is a shame. However, 56% is actually, it's okay. Well, it could be better, but it's okay. Now, when I'm coming to a new project, typically I don't care too much about this value. What I want to ensure is that this value does not decrease. So I want to ensure that when someone does a new pull request, this particular value cannot decrease. So what I can do is simply just clear my terminal, run past, but this time providing this -- minimum option. And I can simply say the minimum code coverage is 50, for example. So now, of course, my test suite is passing, but if I just come here and I pass a minimum of 60, for example, my test suite will fail, telling me that, well, I was expecting the code coverage to be 60, however, you have 56. So, insanely important metric to assess your code quality, the code quality of your test suite. And if you're not using it, you probably should start using it today. Now, I want to talk about something that I actually forgot, which is data sets. Are you guys familiar with data providers in PHP Unit? Anyone? A lot of people. That's cool. So, for those who don't know, data providers allows you to basically rerun the same test with dynamic information. It's very useful because you can run the same concrete test, but with different data. It's very important, especially when you randomize a little bit that information. Now, looking at this particular code, I can see that we have this page called it has welcome page, and we are getting the landing page in assert the status is 200. However, I have 3 more particular pages which would like to have this particular test. So something I can do here is just come here and type something like this. Well, test pages are okay, and do some smoke testing like pages are okay, pass a dynamic information here, which is my URL, get URL, assert the status is 200. Now, if I were to do some PHP Unit approach, the way this would work would be something like this. I would have probably a function with the name getPages, like this one. Then I probably would return like some of the pages I want to execute this test against. So probably the landing page, also the blog, and also the contacts page. And then I would probably have an annotation with the name data provider. Again, I'm showing you just the PHP Unit approach. I think now they have attributes, by the way, but just in case, it would be something like this. And this test would be executed 3 times, each time with a landing page, then with the blog, and finally with a contacts page. Now I want to show you the API we have for Pest, which is a little bit different from this one. The only thing you have to do with Pest is copy the content of your data set, just like that. Then you remove the annotations, no functions, and you just change this. Test pages are okay with the giving data provider. Just 1 line. You clear the terminal, you run Pest, and now, hopefully, you will see the following output. Pages are okay with the landing page, pages are okay with the blog, and pages are okay with contacts. So we have a simple test that pretty much runs 3 pages at the same time, is insanely useful. This is the reality about testing, is kind of avoiding you to go to each page, which takes you probably like 5 seconds each, and having this test suite that takes milliseconds to check that your application is actually okay. So now that I covered data sets, back to the plugins topic. Now, another plugin that I really like is the watch plugin. Have you noticed like how many times I went to my console to rerun Pest over and over again? So I'm kind of changing the code and then go to the console, rerun Pest over and over again. So it would be cool to actually have something that pretty much watches our project, watches our source code, our test suite, and every time we change something, Pest will basically rerun itself. So that's exactly what this plugin is about. So let me show you. I'm going to get back into my project, and I'm going to clear my terminal. Now I'm going to run Pest, this time with the --watch option. Now, what happens when you first run this option is that Pest clears the terminal, runs once, but now I'm going to get back into my test suite right here, and I'm going to remove the to-do. I do it, I save it, Pest just reruns automatically. I don't need to go there and just run it. I can just revert this change, test just reruns, I can make a failure, obviously the test suite fails, roll back, the test suite passes again. So insanely useful to save some keystrokes, especially useful when you're doing some TDD and you just want the test suite to be as fast as possible. So this is the watch option. I also like it as a plugin on Pest. Now, let's move to some more concrete stuff. Do you guys work with big test suites? Like test suites with thousands, probably, yeah, a bazillion of tests. So you probably know that something that happens with test suites, especially over time, is that they just become slow. Like it's something that really just happens all the time. It can take minutes, dozens of minutes. I actually have seen test suites taking hours. I was doing TypeScript at the time. That's why. Anyway, I want to show you something that we have developed for Pest that will allow you to basically optimize your test suite with ease. So again, something that really happens on these test suites is that you have probably thousands of tests and you don't know what's happening. You know that your test suite in general is slow, but you are kind of hard to identify why is it slow. So that's why on Pest we have developed this option that pretty much allows you to identify what tests are actually being slow. So I'm going to get back into my project, and I'm going to move here into my folder structure, and I'm going to open this unit folder, this example test, and check it out. We have two tests on this test suite. One of them is still written on PHP unit, and both of them just combine well together. Both APIs just work. Now, I'm going to go to this basic test, and I'm going to simply sleep here for 2 seconds. Of course, in some real-world scenario, this sleep of 2 seconds would be a MySQL query, which is doing too much, probably a call to an extra API, which you probably shouldn't be doing, caching sometimes. However, to fake this test being slow, I'm going to simply introduce a sleep here. Now, if I run my test suite, of course, I expect this test suite to take about 2 seconds, thanks to this sleep not optimized, and I can see, of course, in the duration that this test suite takes 2 seconds. Now, if I had like thousands of tests, something I could do is just chain -- profile option, and check this out. When you run this -- profile option, you get obviously your test suite running, but then you also get to see this top 10 slowest tests in your application, and of course I get in red label that this basic example test, which is this one right here, is taking about 2 seconds, which is the majority of the time of my test suite. So I can simply come here, optimize my test, probably remove it or whatever is happening on that particular test, just run Pest once more with the profile option, and now my test suite just got like 100% times faster, of course, but insanely useful to really understand what exactly is being slow in your test suite. Now, still about this very slow test suites, we actually have another plugin that is really, really helpful. And that plugin is the Parallel plugin. Now, you probably are all here, and I can see a bunch of you using MacBooks. It's kind of a shame to have a 10 CPU computer and use just one CPU for your test suite. Because that's the reality. When you work with some of the majority test suites on PHP, is that tests just run sequentially. Meaning that you have one CPU running your entire test suite while the other CPUs are basically just chilling, you know? So it wouldn't be cool to actually leverage the full power of your machine to run your test suite? Well, that's exactly what this plugin is about. It's about leveraging the full power of your CPUs to run your test suite. So I'm going to prepare here a demo for you. I'm going to go to this unit folder, and I'm going to create a new test with the name Parallel1 test, for example. I'm going to save this file. I'm going to open a PHPTek and just simply type test basic. I'm going to, again, use the very good well sleep for 2 seconds, and finally use the PHP unit assertion API to assert that true is indeed true. Okay? So once I'm done with this, I'm going to create another parallel to test, just like this, copy-paste the content inside, and hopefully this test is also sleeping by 2 seconds. And as I was telling you, if I run this with past, you will see that I have a failure because I forgot a comma right here. There we go. All right, it's fixed. Run past once more. You will see that this particular test suite, as I was telling you, is running tests sequentially, meaning that my entire test suite takes, as you can see right here on the bottom, 4 seconds. It makes sense because we have 2 tests, each test sleeping for 2 seconds. Now, I'm going to now show you this particular test suite running with a parallel flag. And the difference will be this one. So I run with a parallel flag, the test suite just runs, gets completed successfully, but now I have my test suite running in only 2 seconds, which is half of the time. Now, once I have shipped this feature on past, but also in Laravel 10 actually has this feature already. You just have to run PHP artisan test -- parallel, and you get this power as well. Once we have shipped this on Laravel, we have seen test suites going from 10 minutes to 30 seconds. Test suites going from 30 minutes to only like 4 minutes. That's the difference between going to lunch and having a coffee, you know? So we are really proud about this option. I'm proud as well about porting this to Laravel as well, so everyone can leverage this even on PHP unit. And yeah, let's change topics now. I want to show you something really cool about past, called the expectation API. Now, during this presentation, you have seen me using the assertion API. What is that? It's probably something you are very familiar with. Is doing this assert true, or this assert false, or this assert null. So that particular API, it's specific to PHP unit, and it's still available on past if you like it. However, past PHP offers you a totally different API, which does exactly the same thing, but differently, called the expectation API that I'd like to show you today. So I'm going to get back into my Sublime text right here, and remember this PHP unit test we had. I'm going to just remove this parallel stuff here so our test suite doesn't take 4 seconds to run. All right, it's gone. So back to our PHP unit test. As you can see, this PHP unit test is using this assertion API. And again, we are very familiar with it. And actually, if I, for example, simply copy-paste this content right here, I can actually migrate this test into past simply by doing test basic, passing a function, and of course, copy-pasting the content as I was telling you today. If I run past, this should still work as expected, and it does. And you can see that we are using the assertion API given by PHP unit. And everyone is kind of familiar with this API. We have been using it, but sometimes we don't even question things. We just think, okay, they are there, I have to use them this way. So when we first developed past, we actually start to question everything. So we really wanted to try to improve the experience and question the existing stuff. And when we were looking at this API, there is quite a few things that have clicked to me. So one of those things is that, have you noticed that we are performing 3 assertions on the same value, and we need to pass the value 3 times? Like here, for example, I'm asserting as a string, I need to pass the value, then I need to assert is not an integer, I need to pass the value again, and finally on the bottom, I need to pass the value once more. That's one thing we have noticed. The second thing I have noticed is how verbose some of these methods are. For example, this assert string contains string doesn't even fit the screen. It's just too long for me. Too verbose, and then it comes with also 2 parameters. I don't know what comes first. I always have to Google these things. And other thing I have clicked to me is the fact that I cannot chain assertions. So here, for example, I need to use the variable this 3 times. So when we were questioning those things, we come up with an alternative. That alternative is called the expectation API, and I would like to show you how does that work today. So in order to replicate these exactly 3 lines into the new expectation API, the only thing I have to do is use this function with the name expect. And I pass the value once, and again, just once. And now, I just call the expectations I want to perform on this particular value. One of them is that I expect this to be string. Bam, it's done. The second thing I want to do is expect this value to not be an integer. So when you want to create an opposite expectation, you just have to prefix that expectation with not. And that's it. And then you just chain to be int. So every time you want to negate or create an opposite expectation, you just prefix that call with not. And finally, if you want to check if the given value, which is an array or a string, contains something, you just chain to contain. So no need for methods that don't fit the screen. So here, to contain, PHPTek, of course. And now I can hopefully remove all of this, just chain my call with the call of past, and my test suite is still working as expected. So this is the expectation API. We think it's a little bit smaller, more elegant. So if you like it, you can use it. However, if you still prefer the assertion API, you can just stick using it. It's also OK. Now, this API have a lot of tweaks, a lot of magic methods behind the scenes. One of them is that when there is no parameters, you can simply remove this parentheses right here. Things will just work. Something I really like as well is that when I want to perform expectations on another value, I can simply just create that value, for example, a Boolean, which is true, and then just come here and say, I expect the value to be string and bool to be true. So it also just works like this. There is like some couple of cool methods here. Like, for example, you guys familiar with DD in Laravel? You guys know DD? Yeah, pretty cool, right? So something you can do here, for example, if I revert some of these changes, is that if I want to DD what exactly I'm performing expectations on, I can just chain DD, and I get to see that value on my terminal. So there is a couple of cool things in the expectation API. We don't have fully time for it today, but I would like to encourage you to check it out. OK? Another topic about past we are going to talk today is, and I'm going to drink a little bit of water here. You guys enjoying the presentation? It's cool? That's cool. By the way, the games night yesterday was dope. I don't know about you, but I loved it. All right. Let's change topics. Let's now talk about test filtering. Again, back to this topic of big test suites. If you have test suites which are slow, you really need to work with test filtering because you don't want to wait 30 minutes before having your particular test run. So test filtering is kind of built-in PHP unit. So something I could do here, for example, if I want to run this basic test, is that I can just run filter basic. And of course, I get only this basic test being run. It's built in on PHP unit. So all the features that you like there, like this dash stuff that exists on PHP unit, you can still use them on past. They're all available. However, we have a couple of things that I think you will like regarding test filtering. One of them is the only method. So here, of course, if I just run past without the filter option, I get my entire test suite running. But if I would have some 3-4 tests across all my folder structuring that I would like to run, I can simply chain this only method right here at the end of the call. So if I do this on this particular basic example, I get to see only this example test. It might not seem useful, but I promise you, when you are working with big test suites, filtering across multiple tests that are separated across your folder structure can be complicated. And this option is really useful on that case. Now, the option I'm about to show you after this one, that one is actually very, very cool. So I need to prepare some scenarios here. I'm going to go back into my test suite. And I'm going to go type git status. Of course, I have two changed files, which are only my tests. I'm going to go and do git checkout and create a new branch with the name PHPTek is dope. Let's do it. And then let's commit this stuff, for example, whip. And now if I type git status, hopefully I see nothing. Now, sometimes you are working on a new feature, and you just wish to have some cool stuff that understands what exactly needs to be run, only the tests that you have modified, or only the features that you have actually changed, only the new tests. And you wish to have something that really understands what changes have you made and what tasks needs to be run regarding those changes. And we actually on past, we have developed something for this. So it's called the dash dirty option. So if I just come here and I type vendor bin pass --dirty, it will tell me no dirty tests were found, okay? But now I'm going to get back into my test suite, and I'm going to change things a little bit here. Let's put PHPTek next here. So this particular file, if I type git status, you can see that this file I have changed it. So now if I run past with the --dirty option, only this particular test will be run. So we hook into the Git stuff to really understand what have changed in your project and only run those particular tests. This is really time-saving, I promise you. And since I have developed this stuff, I'm using this stuff like literally all the time. So I have this, at Laravel we have projects like Forge, like Vapor, all those cool deployment tools, and I use this option every time when I'm developing new features on it. Even on the framework, we have like, I don't know, 8,000 tests at this point. So every time I want to change something, I like to use this option because it really tells me what changes I have made and only runs those specific tests. So this is the dirty option, also available on Pest. It just works with Git though. So if you are using some old stuff, it won't work. But if you are using Git, as I think most of you is doing, will just work as expected. Now, one last thing before I close this off. I want to talk about something we have done on Pest v2. So we have released Pest v2 3 weeks ago. We are very excited about the release. We got featured in some of the most important blogs in PHP. The number of downloads increased as well, which is a good thing. We have increased the reach of the framework. But for Pest v2, I really want something cool, something new that makes the Pest v2 release really awesome. So that's why I have developed this new plugin. It's called the architectural plugin. Before showing you, let me tell you what this plugin is about. So I don't know if you have worked with legacy projects. Like most of you probably have worked with legacy projects. And something I have noticed as a Laravel developer is that projects over time, they lack consistency. Meaning that you go to one controller, you will find strict types, final classes, dependency injection, and all the crazy stuff, and it's okay, but then you go to another controller and you find facades, you find global helpers, you find like all the possible things that are changed and that are different, and you simply don't like it. To be honest, I'm kind of okay with both approaches. I don't care. What I do care, though, is consistency on my project. I want that my new developers in my team really understand how something should be coded before they enter on the project. And they should do that by simply looking at all controllers, and they all look the same. If I'm using dependency injection, all of them should use dependency injection, no facades, no global helpers. So until today, this kind of stuff was not testable. Meaning that you need to go send a pull request, goes to your lead developer, the lead developer will make his job saying, yo, this is not okay, we don't do these things kind of over here. And the lead developer will tell you, well, you need to fix your pull request. You need to do dependency injection, you know? So there was no actually way of enforcing this kind of things, and that's why we have created this plugin. It's called the architectural plugin, and I think you will really like it. So let me show you. I'm going to get back into my project, and within the feature folder, I'm going to actually create a new architectural test. And I don't actually have to create a new file. I usually do. That's why I'm doing it on this demo. All right, so let's take a look at some files in my application. So some of you told me that you are using Laravel, so you're probably familiar with this file structuring. If I go to app, controllers, block controller, as you can see, I have a very simple controller written on Laravel. I have a class block controller, which is an invocable controller, and simply returns the block view. While for some of you, this is perfectly fine, some lead developers may say, well, I would prefer to see some dependency injection. I don't want you to use the view global helper. I want you to use dependency injection to actually fetch that view from the view factory. Which is, I'm not telling you this is okay or wrong, but some people like to do those things. So let's try to stick with that example. So the lead developer tells this to the young developer. However, with the architectural plugin, you can actually enforce these rules using testing. So I'm going to get back into my Arch file, which is right here. And let's assume that you don't want the developer to use this view global helper. So something you can do with this plugin is simply type this. Test globals, expect the view global helper not to be used. You run pest, and now pest will basically tell you that the view helper is not supposed to be used on the block controller. So really pointing the young developer to the right direction that this particular view global function should not be used. And as you can see, it's built in, is hooked in into the expectation API. So all the stuff like the not prefix, for example, will just work. Calling the expect method is just basically receives one value, just like the expectation API. So things just work on that regard. So once the new developer see this issue, okay, I cannot use the global helper, so what do you think the young developer will do? Probably use facades, no? Yeah. So let's use facades to effectively reach the same code, but differently. So I'm going to simply go here, type illuminate, support, facades, view, and instead of resolving the view out of this global helper, I'm going to resolve the view out of the facade, which is effectively the same stuff. Now, if I run pest, well, of course, pest will tell me that my test suite is okay, because effectively I'm not using the view global helper. I'm simply using the facade. The lead developer will see this. He will think, well, I told you to use dependency injection, not to use facades. And, well, you can actually enforce that stuff as well in your test suite. So now I'm get back into my architectural test. So here, what I can do is simply type this: test facades, expect, illuminate, support, facades, not to be used. You run past, and this test suite will, of course, fail. So this is the only thing, 3 lines of code that you have to do if you don't want facades to be used forever in your project. How nice is that? Even though I love facades, I use them myself. But, well, if you don't like them, you can have those 3 lines. Now, let's look at this particular output of my test suite. I can see some stuff here which doesn't seem consistent. For example, it's telling me that the rate limiter facade, which is indeed a facade, is being used on my app provider's route service provider. If you are familiar with Laravel, you know that the app providers comes with a bunch of stuff, including facades. And even if you don't like facades, probably over there you are kind of okay with it because they are just configuration, basically. So you just wish to have something that, okay, I want to implement this rule, but in a flexible way. I kind of don't want it to complain about this particular folder. So something you can do is just say, expect facades not to be used, ignoring the app providers folder. So it's a really fluent API, as you can see. You can just read it. Now I run past, and it will get back finally to my block controller, because remember, in the block controller, we are now using this view facade instead of the global helper. So again, the young developer will say, well, if I cannot use the global helpers, I cannot use facades, I may as well use some dependency injection. So let's finally address the issue by using some proper dependency injection here. I can simply do public function, call my construct, and then within this constructor, I'm going to use dependency injection by injecting the factory of views, just like that. Keep my controller empty thanks to property promotion of PHP. And finally, instead of using the facade, I'm going to just use the factory of views to make my block view. And I do need to import this factory on top. I run past, and I expect past to be passing. So I think it's pretty cool stuff, because with just a couple of lines, you can enforce some architectural rules really quick in your application. And there is 2 things that I really like about this plugin that I want to show you as well. So again, I think I have dusted you today, but you are familiar with the DD global function? Everyone? OK. So the DD global function is pretty much the way that some of Laravel developers like to debug. It's kind of an alias for die and var dump. And we all love that function. I debug with that using DD. However, what you probably don't want is see DDs in production, right? So I have personally committed some DDs to production, and then it's a mess because your code is like dying and ugh. So with architectural plugin, you can actually enforce that no DDs will ever be shipped to production. Let me show you. So Do you guys remember at the beginning of this presentation, I've shown you the coverage plugin, right? And one of the metrics of this coverage plugin was the fact that this authenticate middleware is not being tested. Meaning that if I go to this particular middleware and I try to kill it by doing something like this, just come here and type, let me just put this on top so all of you can see, and I type something like request all, because this particular class is not being tested, my code will not die, meaning that my test suite is just passing. So I think everything is okay. So I ship this to production, and bam, you have like your serverless or your physical servers, and customers complain, will be impossible to handle. So something you can do to really avoid that your code will never die in production, like forever, is just come here and type, I expect the view, the DD, and the dump to never be used ever again. So now I just run past, and even though that particular file is not being tested, past will just complain it, oh, dude, you are using a DD in this particular file. You need to remove it before deploying this code to production. You can just come back, fix the issue, and of course, past will not complain anymore. So I think it's very, very useful. Seriously, it takes like 5 seconds to write, and you just enforce this kind of stuff will not happen again forever. Now, there's a couple of things more about this plugin. So, for example, you guys are probably familiar with terms like DDD and all that fancy stuff. So that stuff is really about layering your application. Ensure that your application has proper layers and everything have a clear separation of concerns. Well, with this architectural plugin, you can actually also validate those layers. So here, for example, I could type something like this. Test models, expect the app models layer to only be used on app repositories. So here we are effectively saying, in ensuring that forever, for the entire lifespan of this project, that models files are only used in repositories forever. So I think it's also a very good way of using this plugin. It's kind of making this separation of concerns, models only on repositories. Repositories can only be used on controllers or on the console layer. Things like the HTTP request class can only be used at controller level. It cannot be used at database layer, for example. So also a very cool way of using this plugin. And this was Pest PHP. And if you find this project interesting, go to pestphp.com. You will find this gorgeous website. We just have remade the website. This is Pest, the elegant PHP testing framework. We have this amazing installation instructions. If you wish to just get started with Pest in your existing PHP test suite, you just have type composer require, as you all have seen, and the things will just work, and you can start immediately leveraging all this cool stuff like the architectural plugin. If you are getting started with testing, testing is super overwhelming. I remember starting with testing a few years ago, and I didn't understand it. It was complicated. So we have full tutorials about to get started with testing, how to write your first test and move forward. And we have also great resources. So if you like this talk, we have different versions of this talk in our website as well. Multiple conferences talk in Laracon, India, which was also dope. We had like 1,000 people. And we have courses as well. We have books, video courses done by the community as well, which is pretty cool. And this was Pest PHP. Thank you so much for having me. And feel free to make some questions.
Does the PHP, the expect annotation, expect function, does it support, is it supported with, does it support autocomplete with PHP Storm or any?
Yeah. So those particular functions like eat, test, the expect function, for example, they just work in all editors by default. However, thanks for making that question, because we also have a PHP Storm plugin for Pest, which gives you access to some stuff such as checking what are the to-dos in your application, and give you some cool features that you probably would like see combined with Pest. But yeah, by default, everything just works, including all the magic I have shown to you. Everything just works on PHP Storm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you. So is it possible to extend the expectations for custom expectations?
Yep. Excellent question. So indeed, some question people have is like, if I want to do something like expect this to be user or to be a paid user, indeed, you can type simply expect, extend, give your function name, and then give a closure that will be in the implementation of that function. Meaning that, yeah, people do that all the time, like writing custom expectations to make their code small and more elegant. And I would like just to add that even those custom expectations are supported by things like PHP Storm. So you get auto-completion. If you type something like expect user to be a paid user, you will get that auto-completion as well in PHP Storm.
And then my other question for you is, so so we do a lot of like custom like setup functions, right? Like we have a lot of helper functions inside of our tests.
Yeah.
So how do you usually structure the tests so that those are available for other places?
Yeah, good question. I think you are asking about things such as setup and tear down in PHP Unit.
No, it's more like I need a standard user, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
I need like a standard user, and I want to, so I just call a function, and it sets up a standard user with all like the roles and everything.
Gotcha. Yep. So I'm going to leverage that question to answer differently. So sometimes you have a test that you need to basically prepare a scenario for each test just below. So for that, we have something we call hooks. Hooks are basically the possibility of running, okay, before each, I want to run this, and then you have your particular test, which will run this before each closer each time. So that's our hooks. However, as this gentleman was asking, sometimes you want to have this protected method or this private method that basically sets up a couple of things for you. In Pest, you just write the function. Basically, just like JavaScript, they don't have classes. So you write the function. Function will be basable on that scope only, and you just call the function within your each closure, and it will just be available. You can create stuff with it. All right. Thank you so much.
Still, you can feel I'm still moving bass. Can't you hear that I'm still pushing keys? Study the game from all angles. All youngins ain't immature, Nario it ain't a OG. I'm home free Bogart of the Rat Pack. This is super fly soundtrack meets the big payback. Marlon Brando meets Vincent Van Gogh. Tony Soprano painting pictures like Picasso. If you don't see the bigger picture, you're dead wrong, leave you behind.